Thank you all for coming along. As I was going around talking to people and checking the running order, Malcolm said it's great to see such a turnout, and you said it's something Tony would have absolutely loved to be part of, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would.
I hope we're going to have a nice evening, you know, sharing some memories about Tony, hearing his poems, and some tributes, and some songs. And we've got some members of Tony's family here as well, which is really lovely to see you guys. Thank you for making the trip. I know some people have been having fun and games on the trains, so it's really good to see. Right, I'll make a start. I wanted to say a few words about Tony, and then read a little tribute. I was really shocked and stunned by the news of Tony's passing. I found out he was ill about 2 weeks before he died, when he told me he wasn't well and had a bad diagnosis. I received another message from him on Friday the 21st of January, in which he told me in classic Tony understatement that it was a rum old do with his cancer. And it sounded like he was getting his affairs in order. But still, I had no idea it would be so soon. And his death came as a real shock, as I know it did to so many of his friends, and people who knew him through Speakeasy and the other poetry events he was part of. The tributes that were paid show how highly people thought of Tony, and not just for his writing, but also his kind, gentle nature, and his supportive words, and his encouragement. If I get any of these points wrong, tell me, but I believe he was born in the northeast, but grew up in Coleman. And after a long civil service career in London, he settled in Carlisle in 2010. And I understand he volunteered with the Heathlands project.
Yeah.
And I think Glenmore Trust. And he also returned to writing, which he had done when he was younger, and joined Bookend's poetry group, run by Malcolm Carson, which is held at Cakes and Ale, isn't it? And he was at the first Speakeasy, which was held at the Andalusian in 2014. I think John Chambers, did you read for Tony at that first event? Yeah.
You soon think some better ones after that.
Yeah. Well, John Luffrum, you read for Tony a number of occasions as well, didn't you? And in recent years, Becca Roberts, you read Tony's work so beautifully, both in person and online during the pandemic. He asked me to read his work once or twice, and it was always an honour to do so. But I always felt a great responsibility to get the delivery right, because so many of his poems are just really brilliant. They're so beautiful. He had an ability to be so meticulous in his description, or at times allegorical, sometimes angry, funny, irreverent. When he read his own stuff, there was an extraordinary response as everyone hung on every word and syllable, awaiting to hear what he had to say. Suffering as he did from his lifelong stammer, many people who were in that position might not have had the gumption to get up and read aloud. But Tony did. And it was good that he did. And audiences allowed him to. Many people have said how brave he was to read his work with such an impediment. I think he was brave, although I don't think Tony would like anyone to have made a fuss. I think Tony was determined not to allow his stammer to get in the way of him expressing himself and sharing his words with others. One of the most amazing things was that on the occasion where Tony would sing, the stammer disappeared, and he would regale us with songs so fluently. He would always make the effort to talk to people at Speakeasy and other open mic events. Tony would always be part of other projects which we've been part of over the last 7 or 8 years. I was lucky to get to know him as we shared a lot of car journeys to Poets Out Loud in Cockermouth and to other events over the last few years, often sharing my car with Nick Pemberton, Susan Cartwright-Smith, James Riddick, Max Tyler, Joe Coleman, and others. Sometimes it was just the two of us, and we would talk about poetry, writers, projects, and generally set the world to rights. I counted him as a good friend, and he was reliable and often just there. I remember that Speakeasy was looking for a new home after a year at the Andalusian. And I knew Becca had taken over as manager at Fox's Cafe, and I suggested to her that it might be a good venue for Speakeasy. And also mentioned it to Nick. They had a chat, spoke to Bruce and Luke to see if it might work. And I saw John Chambers at the 2015 Borderlines event in the Frattery and told him that Nick was in talks with Fox's Cafe, but that it was still to be confirmed, so to keep it under his hat for now. Tony approached, and having heard the end of the conversation, asked, "So, is Speakeasy going to be at Fox's then?" To which John replied, "Yeah."
It was still under the hat, though.
His poem, Mistress Onesie, was really good, but it didn't quite fit with any of the other pieces in the 2018 Footstep project. But it was too good not to include, so it found a home in the intermission. And then sadly Nick passed away shortly after the performance at the Carlisle Fringe in 2018. And I recall Tony had been a voice of support for Speakeasy continuing in case Nick died. And during the Wigton Writers' Gathering at Jane Moss-Luffrum's house, when we were concerned about Nick's ill health earlier in that year. I made a number of difficult phone calls to let people know the sad news about Nick on that Monday night, but I'd forgotten Tony was away. And I thought I couldn't text him that sort of news. So I rang his mobile on the Tuesday morning and he answered with a cheery "hello!" And I could hear background sounds of railway station announcements. I can't remember where he was. It might have been Devon somewhere. And I had to say, "Hi Tony, I've got some bad news." And his voice just dropped as he said, "Oh no." And I cursed myself, being the bearer of bad news. But he thanked me for letting him know. And Tony's poem, Cross Country, about his journey to the funeral is a lovely tribute to Nick. I find it quite emotional, and it was a privilege to read it for Tony at the launch of his collection Fresh Air. Tony was so supportive of Colgy Press as well, and he insisted on paying for the copy of the anthologies he was in, despite being eligible for a free courtesy copy. And when Susan and I met Tony to discuss Fresh Air, he invited us to his home, which he described as being like the TARDIS, as it appeared small on the outside, but there was seemingly no end to the number of rooms inside. We got the tour, as did Becca and I, and we met to discuss the readings for the eventual launch. And this is when I found out his first name was James. To mark the final Speakeasy at Fox's Cafe, I produced a special poster montage with photos of many of the writers and performers who'd been a part of the magic or the madness during our time there, and I handed out a few colour copies to half a dozen of the regulars. And Tony had laminated his poster, and it was proudly on display. And beside it was a wonderful cartoon, which had been done by his cousin, Hunt Emerson. And when Susan and I discussed the option of including illustrations with his poems in the collection, I suggested he could ask his cousin to contribute, not realising Hunt Emerson is a very highly respected cartoonist and artist. And amazingly, he did. Susan did a great job with the layout of the poems and the illustrations. The discussion of cost fell to me. I said to Tony, look, my best offer is X amount. And there was a pause and a before he said, I expected to pay more. He then suggested a higher price, which he offered to pay. And again, he was very generous like that. And he had a lot of experience with sending his work off to magazines and for competitions, and had some success getting published. Fresh Air is a really lovely collection, and Tony was thrilled with it. The launch was a fantastic event, and I was very nervous with the responsibility of reading a number of his exquisite poems. I think Becca might have been a little nervous too. No? No. Never the professional.
No.
It was great to see a lot of his family there, as well as many friends. Tony often spoke about his nephew Tom, and who worked as a warden on the Farne Islands. And I'm so glad you were able to make it tonight. Tony really loved nature and the Lake District, as well as hiking and climbing, which so often features in his writing. Also, he was interested in myth, folklore, and had a love of folk music and the poetry of Robert Burns. He was one of the first people I knew to venture to a pub after the first lockdown. And he told us of his experience on a speakeasy Zoom, like he was some kind of pioneer, venturing out to this great forgotten mythical place, the pub. He was a good man and a good friend. He knew what he liked and what he didn't. He wasn't a fan of workshops. He said that he didn't like to write it that way, which is okay. He loved the Carlisle folk experience, as well as music on the Mar and other festivals. He liked to support all the poetry, open mic, and folk events locally and further afield. I remember he was double booked one night when a number of speakeasy poets were at Telly House's underground fairground event, and he could only stay for the first half before heading to Cape Town for their open mic. On completion of the first section, he was heading to the door when the next act took up their position, who just happened to be a burlesque dancer, an attractive slim brunette, not wearing an awful lot, and he found a reason to stay for a moment or two more. After she finished, he was somewhat sheepish, and I said, "You don't get that at Cakes and Ale," which implied, "Indeed." Tony could conjure up brilliant lines that stay with you. I think one of his lines was for the Fryram Speakeasy at Fox's in April 2018, where his definition of isolation was being marooned on Christmas Island and you haven't got a present. He even begrudgingly joined Facebook, as he felt he was missing out on notices. And I'd often shared news of his success about getting published on there, as well as sharing his wisdom and support with others. I still miss him terribly, and I know so many people here too. I know Jeanette Fisher, you were very close to, and my thoughts go to you and to Jane and Tony's family, and everyone who's still feeling the impact of his sad loss. May he rest in peace, our friend Tony Hendry. This is a little piece, I actually wrote this just before Tony died, because I was worried about him and that all these ideas came to me. It's called Variety of Ways, and it's a song for Tony. It goes like this. And though it ain't always easy to speak, you stand up bravely to read out aloud. In sharing your words and your wisdom, you've become a firm favourite with this appreciative crowd. You've told us stories like of the Poplar Queen, decided workshops aren't quite your style. You don't like it when they give a storm a name, but you'll always support the poets in and around Carlisle. And you get to choose how to spend your everydays, living them out in a variety of ways. You maybe climb a mountain, treading in Wainwright's footprints, trundle round dry or rainy lakeland in search of finely brewed pints. Take care where your boots step as you watch plovers preening feathers. Take a tumble into gorse prickles as you brush by purple heathers. You get to choose how to spend your everydays, living them out in a variety of ways. In search of myths and legends, following along a trail told in folk tales. A sense of wonder for Herne the Hunter, stories shared over cakes and ales. A distinctive voice connecting, at times cheeky and knowing. Such words, a breath of fresh air. It's your own song you're singing. And you get to choose how to spend your everydays, living them out in a variety of ways. Thank you very much.
Phil said before about being nervous, and I said no, not out of trying to seem confident or being cocky, but because I might be slightly nervous the first time I read somebody else's work, but I read so much for Tony. He asked me so many times that kind of past the first couple, it was, well, he's obviously all right with it. He keeps asking me. So at that point, it became not me going, what's he trying to say, but just, what am I reading? And it's like he was temporarily giving me his poem to feed back to him. So that's why there was no nerves in that, because this is my poem right now, and then I'll give it back to Tony later on. I'm going to be reading a few different ones at different points. But first, Culdew. I don't believe in household gods. The phial of water on my sill adorns my living space, that's all. A conversation piece, a caprice, something to catch the light. That's all it is. On May Day, 4 years back, high on Skidaw's northern flank, I found the Culdew bubbling free from 400 million years of rock formed from sediment laid down in southern seas. I caught it in a flask and stowed it in my rucksack. I bore it back to my new home and found for it a crystal phial. It catches the morning light, casts the spectrum on the wall. I didn't take it all, of course. Down my lane, down the slope, in a narrow, flood-prone valley, the Culdew still runs swiftly from the mountain to the Eden and the Solway Firth. I never sought to tame it. On freshet days, I walk its banks and revel in its rough, old power. Its rolling, earth-brown waves smack torn trees and fence posts against the buttresses of bridges. And on new pebble beaches, its dippers and goosanders wait for its anger to subside. Biter of paths, it swallows up great clods of soil and grass I'd lately walked upon. Honestly, it's just my local river, so the crystal phial of its water cannot affect my luck or health and requires no pagan worship. Something to catch the light. That's all it is. This is one that I've read several times now at different points and keep going back to because parental guidance. A Cairngorm's gully, fat with snow. The right amount of give at first, boots sinking in a couple of inches. Grand, I thought, a fast way down to a hot drink by the bothy stove. Knowing my lack of common sense, he followed, quietly, in my footsteps. I'd be needing him soon enough. Ankle high, calf high, knee high, and the gully's flanks too steep now to crab sideways onto safe slopes. Then he began to talk. Right foot here, left there. Use the rock for balance. Thigh high now, but it's just a patch. Try flopping like a sea lion for this bit. Use your hands and feet as flippers. Easy, wasn't it? Ludicrous, but easy. Piece of cake. Like those we scoffed back then in the hills near the town. Rest 10 seconds. Plow on for 30. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Keep sweating. Don't give in to the thought of sleep. And by the time you reach that rowan, the snow will be back to ankle deep. When I looked back, he wasn't there and his voice stilled. So soon I learned to face the front as he talked me down. My calm, sure bondsman of safety. Beyond the rowan and out of danger, his voice stopped dead. As before, when slow to reach his hospital bed, I was too late to say goodbye.
Hello. I'm going to read two of Tony's poems, one that I've read before, shortly after he died. Which I'm a little bit nervous about, because there's lots of Cumbrian dialect in it, and I am Cumbrian, which makes it even worse if I mispronounce anything. And I can hear him when he first read it at an event saying the title. It's called Me and My Mara. Here in a dale where Norsemen linger, me and my Mara hide Cumbrian treasure. Beyond the intact wall our Glisky hoard, wrapped in yellow oilskin, is kept in a cleft in a thunner stain too massive to shift. Sundays we unwrap and cherish words. Today, Mamara, tired of knockbacks, becomes all manner of unpleasant men. A taggart, a gomrel, a tastrel, a tropes. One who is slemp and roosty in manner. As he tells me his Ramazan of hard luck, he becomes a flaresome donnet of a man. I've had a better week and I'm content to act the good guy to me Mara's bad. With a single word, mence, I take on propriety, manliness, tact and decency. I'm as weemless as freshly fallen snow. I sing as blithely as a hedgerow hemplin. This time next week, it may be my turn to be glunching. My Mara is my twin, with whom I'm bound to share the words. I'd love to stuff trundlings in his face, then scun him forever off this fell side. But that can never be. And there's a glossary in the book of all this. I shan't read out because it's not as beautifully composed as Tony. And the other one I'll read is, I believe it's in a Speakeasy magazine, but I don't have the physical copy with me today, so I'll read it from the PDF, as God intended. It's called Back to You. My senses are confused. I hear wild garlic, smell granite, and taste colour powder bombs at a holy festival in Bangalore, though I've never been to India. I see a frolicsome breeze, a fox's bark, a tawny owl's hoot, and the burp of a contented baby at a Tien Shan mountain village, though I've not set foot in China. I touch starlight and sound waves, savour the scent of the jet stream, and listen to a batch of bagels, freshly made at a Chicago bakery, though I've never been stateside. I was a prosaic stay-at-home, but since we met the other night, my senses have been nomadic. They move in Silk Road caravans, in diving bells and on sky rockets, on horses escaped from carousels, and in mass molecular migrations. Your smile has gifted me the world and different ways of knowing it, yet everything leads back to you.
Tony was also being published, as many of you know, in national magazines, and there was gradually building up quite a collection. And one of those I came across is in the wonderful South magazine, which I'm contributor to and I subscribe to. And came across Tony Hendry Carlyle, and the poem is Crossroads. Got the time, mate? 3 youths to the crossroads between last train and home, under a cratered moon. Their hands are in pockets. Bet they've got watches, and maybe knives as well. Danger is acrid. Its old tang is back in animal nostrils. Adrenaline blesses me, and my voice comes out. Estuary, no hint of alien. It's 10 to midnight, guys. Did you have a good night? I pass the oral test. Cheers, they say, then saunter off. I stare at the sky intently, as if expecting meteorites. Next day, the paper leads on more hits on migrants. Old dark magic conjures up fresh squads of bully boys to spit, kick, beat and stab. What was the time again? Oh, it's 5 to midnight. Tony was a regular, as Phil so eloquently said, at the poetry group I run at Cakes and Ale. And as Phil also said, he was never one to back off from reading when I used to ask around, anybody like to read this? And Tony was one of the ones who was always there and probably attended as many of those groups, nearly as Dave Simmons, who's in the, how many years now we've been running it? Since 2013 we started off. Dave has missed one, and he's never apologised, or given an explanation. But Tony was a regular too, and this is a poem I wrote about his contributions. It's called The Struggle. We wished him through those words, tortured consonants, plosives, while his thoughts piled up. As keen to read as any, he could hit a line of verse and flow free from impediment, then back to the struggle. His voice is quiet now, the wrestle with limiting syllable ended. But still we have his written word that speaks slow, assured, disencumbered. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jean and I run the folk experience of which Tony was a founder member and regular visitor and contributor and stalwart. And he used to like to write responses to traditional folk songs. And one night he said to me, "Do you know in Bruton Town?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I've written this poem." So I had a look at it. Unfortunately, I don't think it's yet come to the surface of his papers, but I hope it does come to light, because we did it as a duo, and I sang a verse of the song and Tony read a verse of his poem, and it was great. It was absolutely fantastic. So you're getting half of it. In Bruton Town there lived a farmer who had 2 sons and 1 daughter dear. By day and night they were conspiring to fill their parents' hearts with fear. He told his secrets to no other, but to her brother this he said, "I think our servant courts our sister, I think they have a mind to wed." They asked him then to go a-hunting without any fear or thought of strife. But these two bold and wicked villains, they took away this young man's life. As she lay dreaming on her pillow, she thought she saw her heart's delight. By her bedside, as she lay weeping, he was dressed all in his bloody coat. Don't weep for me, my dearest jewel. Don't weep for me, nor care nor pine. For your two brothers killed me cruel. In such a place you may me find. When she returned to her brothers, sister, what makes you look so thin? Oh, brothers, don't ask the reason of me. Oh, for his sake you shall be hung. In Bruton town there lived a farmer who had two sons and one daughter dear. By day and night they were conspiring to fill their parents' hearts with fear.
Malcolm's just mentioned Bookends Poetry Group. It's at Cakes and Ale at the moment. That's where I first met Tony, 2013. And I realised we shared a love of poetry, fell walking and cricket. And he generously selected about 100 of my haiku that formed the basis of my book. And to me that was invaluable help and very much appreciated. And when Speakeasy went on tour to Carlisle, Tony suggested we do a duet of haiku relating to Edenside Cricket Ground and the Roman bathhouse. And for me that was a delightful experience. Towards the end of my tribute poem, I'm going to read my poem Beyond the Boundary, and then I'll read his poem Watch Hill. And towards the end of my tribute poem, I draw on Tony's images from his bathhouse haiku. So this is Beyond the Boundary. Sumptuous Edenside, last till summer gone, no languid gait, he absorbed every blade, rounding the ground, revisiting them all. Sir Gary, Sir Clark, Tomo with Lily. Listening, well, we were all ears. You're talking fractions, hundredths of a second. Fingers followed, read those tricky googlies. Played the best you do, how words make an innings. Kookaburra, tubes, glistening, bouncers like them Aussie quickies through. In grand pavilions, loving souls, his kind, coagulate. That brave Boy Scout, he'd say, bat on, show no fear. Oh, damn it, Tony. We need fresh air, your nature's way, honest, generous, ever one to walk. beyond the boundary, your own pavilion, where Roman horsemen bathe and daydream of almond groves, where steam and strigils cleanse, where boasts in the Caldarium tally with our Carvetian dead. Your eyes on the Empress and Bridget's trowel, easing out the hypercaust tire, noting her sore knees, that leaping heart. Your time to warble a ballad and twirl Sir Donald's bat. So, Watch Hill. The only note I put in here is one word, which says courage. And underneath, before the poem, he says, Watch Hill is another name for the hay near Cockermouth. Watch Hill. I was a decent Cub Scout. I was a sixer, orange sixer, I recall. And man had plenty of work to do, sewing badges on my itchy jersey. I dibbed-dobbed like a good 'un. Proper scouts was something else. Khaki, berets, more orders to obey, and big, tough boys to cope with. Not sure about all this. Mama and Dad said, give it longer. So I did, and that's why I was out on Watch Hill on a moonless night, climbing cat-like towards the top, part of the attacking side, trying to dodge defenders with torches. I forget all the rules of combat. I know that court lads had hands stamped to show they were dead. And in a throwback to the old days, the winners got to light a beacon. The attackers lost. Not one of us reached the top. And there was a mighty slaughter. It wasn't losing that made me cry, more the manner of my dying. The big, brave lads who caught me stamped my hand, picked me up and tossed me into a gorse bush. War crime! I blubbed like a babby, and they laughed and left me to it. Later, still picking gorse needles from limbs and tear-stained face, I watched the fire's snaking coils. Beacons rejoice, or warn that life brings risk, and enemies are near. Did I stay in the Scouts? No fear.
Oh, do I need to start and stand there? Is that all right? That's fine. Just need somewhere different. This is one of Tony's pieces, which was in 2018 in the Dawn Treader, which is an Indigo Press publication. It's called Runaway. Bugs hop on a clump of grass by the LED light of my head torch. From stage right, a hunter beetle, Colosoma, with a green-black gloss, is seeking caterpillars. I kill the light. I stare peaceably at half-forgotten constellations. Families of gods and goddesses defend me as I lie beneath them on a tump in a fold of the hills. The yips I heard a while back was only foxes, and the shuffle, snuffle and grunt was surely just a foraging brock from oak woods at the bottom of the slope. Rogue pebbles below my mat, and my thin old sleeping bag will lead to dozing only. I'll drift in swaddled infancy from earth to void and back again. In my rucksack, double bagged, inside a plastic clip-lock box, all my worries are switched off. With no reception in these hills, No more calamities can find me. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Nick. I've known Tony for over 10 years. I was amazed to hear about 2 years after I met him that he climbed all the Munros. So I was really jealous that he climbed all the Munros. And then he went on to do all the Wainwrights as well. There's only 6,000 people I'm aware of that have done the Munros, so I don't know how many people have done the Wainwrights and the Munros. Not very many people, I don't think. So it shows his commitment to fell walking and nature, really. And that's where we had something in common as well, because I'm into walking, poetry and nature, so that's always helpful. So this is a dedication for Tony. Tony, here stands the Munroist, an explorer of peak and glen. But here, the few have achieved these feats or conquered the fights within. Each step a thought, each mile a masked revelation. The detachment deepens and footsteps echo. Traversing tarn, law and lock, paths and plan collide. The unconscious expands, combines and uncovers. The magic occurs. His poems a patchwork of scrambled dreams. Eons pass in an instant. Words form, a life on paper appears, woven by the wilds and these quiet places. Serenity placed simply in verse and line. Experience has played out, leaving his legacy alive. Thank you.
Hello, I'm going to read one on behalf of Kate and Renel and also family as well. It's probably one of his many poems that I think we're a family of nature lovers, and it really kind of includes this sort of very perceptive detail of observations of nature, and has weaved that very beautifully into his words. So this one's drinking river water. Another river walk. Two sandpipers in a side channel, all fuss and bobtail as they hunt. One hawks a morsel from the mud and throws back its head to swallow. Cinnabar moth at rest. Red bars and spots on black wings, in flight between ragwort suns, is a swanky black-red, like a swishing Dracula cape. Nothing is still for long. The heron tries to be, but the wind ruffles black crest and grey feathers. It stalks away on toes so strong, they could scop a river rocketus. Here's the flood meadow, waving with white and lilac petals of ladies' smocks. Last year was ugly. The dark brown weeds are parable, mysterious crop rotation. Where the river jackknives, there's a consistency in the changes. Each spate brings fresh geographies of channels, silt banks, pebble islets, new white water over new boulders. At the edge of a new beach, an old right, we too stoop again to fill our palms with Colgew's water. Back creeks and ate a little more, so it's grimace, grin, then drink. Thank you.
I'm just going to retune a little bit because I find that when I tune beforehand, I end up tuning to everybody else's family before it starts. And so during half time, you might want to consider the fact that you are having small talk at about 432 kilohertz and generally about C sharp. Something to talk about with you. The last time I saw Tony, it was a beautiful chat with him in his backyard, and he told me then that he'd found that if he sang folk songs, he never stutter. I thought, that's amazing. It's amazing. So next time you're on the folk club, I'll come and see you. And that was it. I saw him again. And so it goes. I like to call it very good. So I'm pleased to be able to when I was asked to write, when I was asked to read one of his poems, and I chose Trustmadore because he had a remarkable love of place and people, and when they combined, it was tremendous poetry, and it's a love I share. It's always felt important to me too. So I looked at that poem and I suddenly saw the tune in it. So you'll have to bear with me. Also, does anybody know where Trustmadore is?
Yeah.
Do you know what it's called? Is it actually called Trustmadore?
Trustmadore.
Thank God for that. Because
It's near Great Cockle.
that would be quite apt, probably, the way I play. I was a bit worried that in a county...
It's one of the northern fells to the east before you reach Binsey.
Right.
Binsey's across the other side, but it's that group of fells, Brave Fell and so on.
I was more worried about the pronunciation of it, because this is a county that calls Torpenhow Trepenna. So I think I could end up singing Trustmadore and find out it's Tremarthen or something. So here we go.
I can't account for how locals call it.
No, nobody can.
Maybe Tudor.
Yeah, probably Tudor. Yeah, the song's called Tudor then. Folding quiet fells like a skidder, a cradle of heather and sheep-cropped grass, and a clattering beck that drops from the night. Trustmadore. Food stop where she drank back water, ate oatcakes or ham and mayo sandwiches, and tasted the bliss of forbidden chocolate. Trustmadore. She saw the span of folk who passed this way, from Viking shepherd to Tudor miner, and shiny couples sharing baby carrier duties. Through the years she scoured away the school inspections, the hospital visits, and the head of his fists before the final split. Trust me, Lord, trust me. Reachable, sheltered spot, better than hilltop. For the unfit friends and kin who call up here today, here at Trustmeadow. Her request, her ashes will be scattered.
John and I knew Tony for a number of years through all the various writing venues, Carlisle and Cockermouth and elsewhere. And we had a shared love of fell walking and the environment and traditional music. We used to see him pre-pandemic for many years at East Connemara, and he used to come to the Tonighters at Town House, and it feels like he should be here. I'm going to read two of his poems. They're about walking, but they're about more than that. There's a sort of gap between expectation and the sort of absurdity that he picked up in things. In that gap, he writes about the things we learn that we don't expect to learn. This is called Tuesday Trundlers. I particularly like this because I thought trundling was a Midlands term. I didn't know you said that. Tuesday Trundlers. I will set up a walking group and call it Tuesday Trundlers. We will give each other lifts, and our old bones will creak as we bend to lace our boots in car parks of country parks. Each walk will have a leader who has tested the route for flatness and firmness. We will set off gingerly with a quiet clack of chat and lecky trekking poles to walk round a reservoir or wend through woodland. The slowest among us will be in the vanguard. There will be frequent stops, ostensibly to admire visitors, but really to catch breath or pee discreetly behind trees. We will follow a golden rule, never to speak of the fells that all of us used to climb. This will last for a season. Then we will say, sod it. We will tackle Wasdale Screes, one step up, two steps down, and collapse in a tangle at the bottom to cackle at our absurdity. Wheat ears will pop up close as rainbow bruises bloom. Golden plovers will fly over, and a young peregrine falcon will perform its acrobatics to our tears of delight. This one's called Rockcliffe Marsh. We shared a love of the marsh, the parts of Cumbria that people probably don't really associate with Cumbria. He loved the fells, but he also loved the marshes. 6 lazy years it takes me, until one April morning, I stop at a headstone of polished black granite to tell a brave young woman how my friend misses her. Then walk through the village and follow the curve of Eden to salt marsh and vast sky. West on a spit where river hits Solway, barnacle geese gather to fly to Svalbard. Their cackles are mockery for taking so long to find us. I want to get closer to them, leave seawall far behind, and find a safe way round curls of mudsuck creeks, but settle for a token outing to the nearest driftwood log. These logs rest on dry turf along the highest tide line. They are white, as if shocked by once-in-a-generation surges that fetched them. I rest on mine as hares run. Redshanks scold, a lark soars. 2 cabbage whites gyrate, and clumps of greening rushes sweep the gentle breeze. Like all of these, and the cackling geese, and the brave young woman, I am separate and joined. Something and everything. I am lost and found.
I think Jayden's already given the introduction of where we met Tony, and he was kind enough to trust me with reading some of his poems from the early days of his time at Speakeasy. I think I've actually read a couple of these 2 before, for him at Speakeasy, and they reflect our other interests as well, of the hills and of the natural world. And the second one's about cricket as well, which another shared love that we have. Now, Phil's already mentioned Tony's dislike of naming storms. This first one's called Desmond. Desmond. Haynes, a West Indian opening batsman who piled on runs with Gordon Greenwich. Tutu, a churchman with a wondrous laugh who battled apartheid and intolerance. Decca, a Jamaican ska and reggae hero, writer of Isla Rights, died in Thornton Heath. Lynham, a consummate sports broadcaster, born Ready Mustachioed in County Clare. These, not the storm that rocked my city, a proper Desmond. It was what it was, a set of isobars, not looking for a name. It's cold physics colliding with geography to fetch floods, dinghies, foul deposits, and roadside piles of spoiled endeavour. Sling storm names onto sodden sofas for anthropomorphising in 16 letters of junk. And consider local Desmonds, whose chaffing mates in pubs and offices will tag them ever more as scapegoats. Think of Desmonds routed by a namesake, and pregnant mums seeking other names. Think of such issues repeating like burps in future storms. Frank, Henry, Imogen, Phil, and other cosy names for the inhuman. Stop the storm names now. This one's a more crickety one, but with Tony's usual underlying observation and thoughtfulness about people. It's called Scorecard. I'm not there. I'm only 3, a little lad in another county, when the West Indies play Cumberland in Carlisle, on the cricket ground by the Eden, 12th of September 1957. Note the early autumn date. They've been touring England since April. Been thumped 3-0 in the Test series. They must be aching for home and family. Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana and Jamaica calling them back to the Caribbean blue. A one-day match. They get near 200. Rowan Canai scores a rapid 74. An explosive batsman known for falling over when he hits his pull shots over the rope. Garfield Sobers gets 44. Lithe as a panther, soon the best all-rounder the world has ever seen. Clive Walcott is captain. Wes Hall, Sonny Ramadan and Alf Valentine are other famous names who play this day. It rains. It must do, as Cumberland only reached 12 for 3 wickets in reply. So what's the matter, this damp match, at the end of a long tour, that I never see because I'm only a little lad, age 3? Well, Clive Walcott is captain. He's a black man, a natural leader of men, but he can only be vice captain on the tour. No black man has captained the West Indies, not in a test match. I see this Carlisle match as a piece of kindling for a mighty conflagration. 3 years on, when Walcott is denied the captaincy again, he retires from Test cricket, but the fire is lit. Soon, Frank Worrell, black man, gets the job. Sobers and Canhigh succeed him. Then Clive Lloyd, another proud black man. 20 years on from Carlisle, the fire blazes. Nothing gives the Caribbean people more pride or unites them more than their champion team. Viv Richard bats like an emperor. Holding glides in to bowl like whispering death. Then there's Roberts, Garner, Marshall, Lara, Richardson, Walsh, Ambrose and all the rest. Fire in Babylon. Fire in Babylon. Fire in Babylon.
They gesticulate too much to have metal bars on either side of the cage before. This is one I read for Tony on online Zoom speakeasy back in October 2020, and it was one where I could see his eyes light up because I brought a prop. Sorry I don't have it this time, but it died. Semper Vivum. I found her behind other plants on a sun-starved lower shelf of a ramshackle garden centre. Know how to grow on the label, just the name of Semper Vivum, which I liked. Always Alive sounded good. COVID, autumn, second wave, I couldn't even get a flu jab. Masked customers and cashiers did business while they could. Winter lay ahead. I planted my newfound friend in a vacant part of a raised bed with plenty of room to grow. She was small. Within days, she was smaller as offsets broke. One green rosette of maybe 30 tufted leaves, and I will fret for all of them. Who is the guardian, she or I? But online news gives hope. A frost-resistant succulent and a rapid spreader. Culpepper, the herbalist, said a posset of the juice was singularly good in all hot eggs. Perhaps I'll put that to the test. Of her other names, the best is Jupiter's beard. She was grown on roofs to ward off bolts of lightning from that quick-to-anger god. Flowers don't come for years. But in the circumstances, I can always live with that.
Okay, it's been a really good first half. Thank you to everybody who's read so far. I'm looking forward to hearing the second half. I've just got a couple of quick poems here. Coldew Press published a collection for John Hegley at the end of last year, and he came up to the Carlisle Folk Experience at the start of December, and was ushering John Hegley into the RIOB club where we were, and the first person we met on the stairs was Tony. Now, John Hegley recognised him from the Speakeasy Zoom sessions been doing and recorded on YouTube. And Culture Press had sent John Hegley a number of publications we've done, and he read Fresh Air and really enjoyed it. And I got an email from John Hegley this afternoon. He knew this was on. And he says, if it feels fitting, could you read this short rhyme for Tony at the event tonight? But it's just a little limerick. I heard Tony sing in Carlisle. Then gave me a think and a smile. In the book of his words that is covered with birds, to Tony, his words and his why. And that's from John Hegley. He says, have a flying night. He was absolutely blown away by seeing Tony sing at the night. And yeah, such an amazing thing. You may have noticed there's a couple of boxes of books at the back. I saw Chris the other week, and there's a number of Tony's poetry books. And Chris, you were wondering whether people might like to have a look at them, and you might like one or two of them. Because we're trying to find a good home for the books. Yeah, is that okay?
A good home for them.
So, in the break, have a little look at the boxes of books. You're welcome to take one away. I think there's also copies of Fresh Air, if anybody wants to buy those. There are 5, so that's up there as well. So yeah. I was struck by seeing all the books when I met up with you the other week, so I came up with this. It's called Library of Life. It goes like this. Your books sit on the sturdy shelf, waiting, indefinitely waiting for you. Small monoliths placed side by side, with sage-like wisdom and knowledge held deep within. Encoded in squiggles of black ink on cream paper, most aging, and taking on that musty yellowed quality so evocative of old bookshelves. They stand as a testament to a curious mind, a reader who eagerly opened the often unassuming cover and leapt into a world, somewhere you'd gladly immerse yourself. You'd plunge into the ordered swirling, the poetry of ideas, finessed by the minds of others. Journey boldly into a realm of creativity, history, myth, folklore, folk music, hiking, exploration, art. These miniature doorways open up portals to another time and place, an infinite gallery for you to visit. A picture forms in the mind's eye, sharp eyebrows frown, the look of concentration etched on your face. The soft scribbled pencil note inside the faded jacket, written in a younger hand. Your name, university, a joke in the margin, brings you to life again for a moment. Carefully underlined passages reveal a thought process, analysis of other people's script, perhaps for discussion or simply self-taught criticism, looking for tips. Recalling that time when you were told, just write it down. And once again you remember, writing is rewriting. Some well-known names sit contentedly beside less famous scribes, but still household names, depending on the residency, of course. Man or woman may leave behind a legacy of words, and through recitation, an echo of the author lives once more. Upon vacated shelves lay these repositories of knowledge, selected by you, a reflection of who you was, are, and were. A self-curated archive of your interests and personality. Your books leave a legacy of a life lived. And I hope they will find a good home to go to. We're going to kick off the second half with the poem about Speakeasy. I've got Becca to read for us. So here we are. Here's Becca.
So this is one from the first issue of the Speakeasy magazine in its shiny form, not in its old slapdash photocopied form from many years ago. Good slapdash! So way back in 2017. Speakeasy. Syllabic speech was popular once. It went beyond trochees and iambs to give each syllable equal weight and keep it separate from its fellows. Therapists taught it with metronomes. Prolonged speech, or slowed speech, was next. Stammerers drawled, elided, became vocal followers of manana. Wait for us, we beg our listeners. Sentences will get there in the end. Neither method worked for me, nor their backups of breath control and relaxation. My tidal stammer ebbed, flowed, ebbed, flowed. It was listening in, monitoring, being my GCHQ that did for me, and the cost of failures was beyond all telling. Then, self-taught therapy. Residential course, 2 stammerers holding the ugliest conversation about women that I'd ever heard, as if to teach me that our condition had nothing to do with sainthood. And focus. Finding that in crises, or anger, or delight, I spoke fluently. And work. Jobs and promotions lost, all their carefully worded feedback, until, knowing I deserved better, I quit the cramping effort to control, stopped preferring to stay quiet, and just let rip. This is how I speak. Deal with it. Listen to the content. So, if I never got over my stammer, it got over me. And I can say this now, in front of 40 people at a poetry night at Fox's Cafe. All 40 will have their battles, their slow, hard ways of winning. Some will be too proud to ask, but all will need your support.
Chris asked for that poem to be read especially, so thank you, Becca. This is Tony's poem, Cross Country, in memoriam Nick Pemberton. All those who came for you, I guess I was the only one to go cross country. There were blackberries, hips and haws, come to premature, bruised ripeness in the wet wake of a summer drought. And something I'd never noticed, florets of a sturdy wayside flower mimicking sun rays. What was it? And how much did the name matter? Common fleabane. Just write it down. Wet grass and cowpats in the meadow, then the coldew, full of frothing water after downpours. On the footbridge, I looked hard for a dipper's white bib or a kingfisher's cobalt flash. Not today. Today, the steep lane to Cummersdale is in Mizzle. Past the scrap metal clutter where travellers lived, in the neat village with Redfern pub and flowers and tyres on the green, the clouds parted briefly. I sought rainbows, still hungry for signs. But the clouds rejoined, the rain came, and me and my lopsided blue umbrella battled on to Dalston Road, turned right past the Pirelli factory, got to the grounds of the crematorium, found a bench. I wiped my shoes, put on my black tie as clumsily as a kid, and moved towards the host of people there to honour you. And you said again, just write it down.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm the Cockermouth contingent. Was going to read this because it took me back when Tony read it, because I remember picking rose hips as a child at school, and I think from what I've gathered that Tony was actually in the year above me, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, I thought I'd read you this. It's about the things you sort of remember from childhood and the ones you just chuck away. Today, I pick a rose hip and flip it into the cold dew. It races on rough brown water after the first storm of autumn. It isn't ripe enough. 50 years ago, we had to wait for the glowing red of half-term. No green or orange tints allowed. National Collection Scheme. Cash for rose hips. Made into rosehip syrup for pregnant mums at Del Rosa's factory in Gravesend. So kids with canvas buckets on the wild, scratching banks of another swift Cumbrian river, all gloveless droplets of blood, the colour of hawthorn and berries, hips and haws, never far apart. The rate per pound was dismal, but the real rewards were high. Gathering hips wasn't like cubs, where we dib-dib-dobbed on cue and gathered badges to avoid the hot red cheeks of failure. No Keiras on Derwent banks, no mums and dads, no teachers. Red blood was ours to expend, river water ours to tumble into. Hips for us, oars for the thrushes. Charms of red-masked goldfish on thistleheads, the cobalt zip of kingfishers as we picnicked. On the flats across the river, loping hares stopped to look into the slow gold fall of the year. I sensed a sort of oneness that we mostly lose in time. Wordsworth said it better. He was ours, born by Derwent, a mile from where we picked. Today, I pick another rosehip and flip it into the cauldron. And now I'm going to read you something I wrote the other day, but having wasted something like 2 hours this morning trying to print it, and my printer refused to work, I'm going to have to read it off my phone. And it's just sort of my take on Tony, I suppose. Called Mr. Tony Hendry. Tony Hendry was a true gentleman, a poet who could rhyme and scan, and his interests, wide and diverse, were reflected in his legacy of verse. He always seemed to write so well. I'm totally jealous, truth to tell. To top it off, there's another thing. The damn man could even sing. He lost his stammer when he added a tune. Oops, I mentioned the elephant in the room. On that thought, I'd like to reflect. At least something made him imperfect. And he never allowed that to get in the way of saying whatever he wanted to say. Should you think this rhymes an awful plumer? Remember, Tony had a sense of humour. And an irreverent poem wouldn't face Tony.
At least you always applaud when I wrote baloney, which brings me neatly back to where this began. Tony Hendry was a true gentleman.
Okay, I've been given the honour of a trio of poems to read. Thank you very much to Phil for asking me to read these. So these are two from Fresh Air and one from a Speakeasy Night. I don't actually know if it's published anywhere else. I'd love to know. So the first one is Wild Winter. All winter long we plodged through muck to reach the tops. Boots got stuck in gloop, and costly fabrics flopped as rain defeated warp and weft to soak us to our skins. The jet stream made us circus clowns, chucking bucketfuls of water at us, while the placid souls stayed dry indoors. We walked and walked because we must. Rain's best mate, the wind, lashed us. Loose rucksack straps whipped faces. We were like flagellants on holy days, and the fells were our redemption. Not all daft, we favoured the softer ones, gusts flooring us on Ulsgaard and Knot, were death on crinkled crags or gable. We crawled to cairns, to scowl at Merk. One time, the clouds were split by sun. Cross Fell and Criffle were glimpsed, and the Kestrel hung where Ruffton Gill came roaring down in a rage of glory. I really liked Tony's poems when there was just a little hint of that impish, slightly push the boundary here kind of line. So with that in mind, this is Wheaty. We meet each March on my way to snow-patched mountaintops. This time I'm toiling up Cross Fell. Ahead, on rock, beside the path, your white rump and black tail band bob and flick your annual greeting. Like an over-familiar acquaintance, I call out your Anglo-Saxon name of white arse. Like me, you are generations. Your flight loops across my footsteps. So we make circles and diameters through the ages. I am tribesman, racing to harass Roman cohorts. I am drover, taking shorthorn cattle southward to market. I am farm lad, made orphan and migrant by reavers. I am shepherd, lead miner, waller. Now just another Saturday walker, gaining height to banish troubles. You evolve in your way, I imagine. Bill size, wingspan, plumage, changing minutely year by year, and gradual shifts in flight paths from Senegal's scrub through Spain to here, as guns and traps dictate. Today, your alarm call is sharper, and you are quicker to fly off. And then this one was always my favourite. It's Mel Brake, and I'll never forget him or me hearing him read it at Speakeasy. So Mel Brake. Crow-black country nights, headlights sweeping narrow roads, callow drivers cornering too fast, unbelted passengers swaying, sliding, arms out windows, palms tom-tomming on rust-flecked Ford Cortina doors. Many years ago, this was, before laminated prove-it cards, when bar staff in Cumberland Wilds were more tolerant than those in town. Friday nights, carloads of sixth forms drove to the Kirkstyle Inn and back, and by a miracle, none died. None were more alive than then, when risk and beer slew devils. Essays and swatting could wait. our respite, doing as we pleased, like climbing Melbrake at closing time. Was it a bet or a dare? I forget. 7 of us took up the challenge, going direttissima by moonlight, scaling the steep ridge behind the pub, watched by scornful herdwick sheep and the silver eyes of 2 lakes, Crummock Water, Lowes Water. Halfway up, I fell and gashed my wrist, and the blood looked like black ink by the moon. 2 hankies staunched it, mine tied to the one Lynn offered, then onward to the summit cairn, which Luke reached first. Of course, hill farmer's son, used to herding sheep, county standard runner, our top bloke. High fives were yet to be invented, so we all shook hands, jigged around, and howled in triumph at the moon. My wrist still shows the scar. Sometimes on this sublunary path, I track White Bridge over Blue Vein and recall swift, sure-footed Luke, back then on that Melbrake climb, first among us to run out of time.
It's in this.
Got 2 pieces here. First is was written by Jeanette Hostel, who can't be here tonight, and it's gorgeous. It's gentle. A gentleman, sadly missed, fondly found, busy staying alive in fresh air. And this is Tony's poem that Phil mentioned before, that was put in to be part of Footstep, but didn't sort of fit the story, so we put it in anyway because it's too good to leave out. Called Mr. Swansea. Doggedly, I pull against the lead. I drag my mistress down the road towards the corner scrap of grass where I do my morning business. No pauses to sniff at gate posts. Let's just get this over with. She's wearing the onesie again, fluffy pink and sky blue number, with long ears flopping from its hood and a bright white scut above its bum. We look like a rabbit chasing a dog, but let's get this over with. Late commuters at the bus stop look as grim as black-capped judges. Can't be asked to dress properly. Back soon to glowing daytime telly while we work to pay her benefits. But they don't know her. And I do. And I won't say if their guess is true, or if she's a carer for her fading mum, or if the bunny hood hides hair loss brought on by the bouts of chemo, or if she just thinks, you know what, this is me, I will dress as I please. So smile and let me lift this short, dark day. Now, as well as any terrier can, I've thought it through. I stop pulling and walk proudly beside my mistress. Grey skies flip suddenly to pearl, and a sort of beauty visits Upby.
Yes, it's me. I'm back. Heckler as well. What's this? first one, some you may have heard it, some you may not. I wrote this because it was the only way I could remember it. It's called The Clipboard Has Fallen Silent. The clipboard has fallen silent. The lights have been turned down dim. The clipboard has fallen silent. But we all remember him. The clipboard has fallen silent. The stage is now empty. But he'll still hang around. His words will float around. The clipboard has fallen silent. Don't feel sad, be glad for the time he had. All this and no iPad. So make some room in that smoky back room. You'll see him in that low-key gloom, playing with the boys and the girls in that smoky, low-key back room. There is no more mystery for my man from that ministry. He'll go around carefree, that's what he was to me. He may have left this mortal stage, but friends don't get in a fix, because he's now causing mayhem in 1956. This is a new one. Ooh. This is called Pathways to the Lakeland Hills. If you follow these directions, I don't know where you'll end up. They are long and somewhat craggy, the pathways to the Lakeland Hills. They can take you from Friar's Crag or Half, Close Bay, from Portinscale to the wooden paths to Hawes End. From Gutterscale to the famous Cat Bells, or over Waller Crag and around Watton-Lath. Have you pronounced it? From the Vale of Lawton and Cockermouth to Buttermere Valley and Crummerquarter and Loweswater. From Gatescarth to Sourmill Gill, onward towards Red Pike, High Stile, High Crag, and dropping down to Scarth Gap. But if you want a pathway that's a little easier on your plate of meat, that's feet. How about starting from Colbeck and onward to Carrickfell and High Pike? Or follow the River Eden from Carlisle or Kirby Stephen and head towards Wetherell and the caves of St Constantine just south of High Hesketh. Or catch the train which runs between Boot and Ravenglass, then walk, or hobble, as the case may be, to Dalegarth, Eskdale Green, and the waterfalls at Stanley Gill. Oh, there are many more places to visit. You can get there, but make sure to wrap up well, and make sure that your map is clipped on a clipboard, as you don't want to get lost in them there Lakeland Hills.
So, this is my first time reading one of Tony's poems, but Tony was one of the first poets in Carlisle that I met, and one of the people that first kind of welcomed me to the fold when I first started going to Speakeasy back when it was in Foxes, and turns out as one of the, I say he's one of the kind of like giants of Cumbrian literature, so in the 21st century, and you know, going back even before then. So it's an honour to have been asked by Phil if I wanted to read something out, and Phil's picked this out for me. I remember when I first met Tony, there was this thing called Free Range Fridays, and it was kind of like a get together for freelancers that Tony would go to, but I actually kind of like saw Tony writing some of his poetry, because he used to kind of, the rest of us would come and we'd get our laptops out and start doing business and sort of like planning things and chatting and stuff, and Tony would just sit quietly with his headphones on, writing away. And then when I first went to Speakeasy, Tony was there, and I got to know Tony's style, and I quite like this poem that Phil's picked out for me, because it's a classic Tony Hendry poem in that it's a tale of his intrepid adventures in the Lake District, with a wry revelation at the end of it as well. It can kind of make you laugh a bit. Tony was always good at making people laugh. And also it's a poem about photography, so it means a bit more to me as well. and I'm not ready before, so thanks for picking this out, Phil. So, December 1981. 4 photos of a frozen lake, faded by age to moody brown and lilac. The only brightness is an icebound yellow buoy. 2 yards from my lens, 200 from shore. Over half a lifetime later, I walk on ice again. I liked focal points. Next up in the album is a fat block of ice, maybe a frozen snowball, with cat bells to High Spy in the background. Then the cruel month and year, scraped by boots in thin snow cover, with Borrowdale behind. Last, as proof that my inanity was boundless, my vacated boots had footprints so winding that I must have been dodging thinner patches. The angle shows I took the photo on my belly, spreading my weight on Derwentwater ice. Trusting its verdict, I cannot recall the thrill, nor whether I heard any creaks or cracks. I know a red bus stopped on Seatoller Road to blare its horn at me insistently and urgently, until I waved and moved back to shore. When we're looking through Tony's things, if those photos do appear, love to see them.
Hello, I'd just like to say thank you for Phil putting this together. It's so nice to see so many faces. This is Sage. His name was Sage, and he'd lost count of herb jokes. No, his missus was not called Onion, nor did he play in a folk rock band with parsley, rosemary and thyme. Sage as in wise man. That would do. By middle age he'd grown into it, or so he reckoned, dram in hand, on visits to the Hare and Hounds. Finding consensus was key to it. What do you think, friend? And you? Gather many views, show empathy, know we are complicated souls of infinite depth, deserving respect. Analyze, don't ignore the experts, check facts, think long into the night, then work out what's the middle way that benefits the greatest number and does the least amount of harm. Sage was resolute for moderation. Then broadband reached the village. Sage's quiet cottage got hooked up, and he had the internet at last to garner opinions more easily and work for the happy medium. But it soon got toxic. After a rash post, Sage found he was a fudger, an overeducated prick, a yes man for the liberal elite, a wavering dick, and much besides. Progress, he was informed, meant one side destroying the other. Pyromaniacs said people of his sort would soon be burnt to cinders. Year 0 was around the corner. Smirks and winks at the pub. A whisper that a couple of regulars were amongst those goading him online. He snapped, came in with a hammer. Sage is just starting his sentence. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I remember working in Cake Snail Cafe and Bookcase a couple of years ago now, and I remember seeing Tony quite a few times coming in for a book or coming in for coffee, and yeah, he was just, I think, if I was to sum him up, I think he's just one of the most genuinely joyful for your success kind of person, and was just genuinely so happy to always support his friends and see them succeed and owned their success as his own, and that was just one of the most wonderful things about him. And I remember frequently leaving my work in the cafe to go and say hello to him when he came in for a coffee, and then some poor customer had to wait that little bit longer for their coffee because I was chatting to Tony. So it's really an honour to read his words. I'm going to read 2 poems. This one's Parakeets in the Park. Mary Anderson calling, I'm right there, walking the dog in the park you're talking about. Dashing ring-necked parakeets in the trees by the playing fields, as if this was Delhi or Lucknow. I love the bonny green dazzlers. Flash company for me. Victoria Park in Glasgow, Scotland's only breeding colony, the most northerly parrot flock on earth, screeching in my park, barked at by my Jack Russell. Joyous birds with coral beaks. When I first set eyes on them, it was magic, pure glamoury. The last man who phoned in called my dears a marmite bird. Me? I love marmite on my toast. Another loon wanted them shot, called them an invasive species. No. They're versatile survivors which find a place in nature. Xenophobes are always with us. This one's called Leaving Early. You left the pubs and parties early before last round or last dance. As crowds roared for encores at gigs, you slid out to cool air on the way home. When friends asked why, you found reasons. The train won't wait. Too many pints already. You escaped, leaving the mess to others. Samaritan types could bear the brunt. Alleyway screams were not for your ears, blood-splashed pavements not for your eyes. Let other noses smell the sick and fear can't slice my skin or break my bones. Safe in the bedsit, you blocked the doubts. The frozen lake you walked on, the dizzy ridge, the forest bivouac when bears came foraging, the famished 14-hour trek to Road Head, the snow whole night, the Mad Ulysses quest, such things were not for gutless cowards. Yet the friends you left faced down the small hours streets of mutual support, linked arms, took taxis, bared their souls, offered beds and sometimes shared them. Thus menages and marriages bloomed, then kids, then grandkids and all. Now you see your deeper cowardice, to work so hard to miss all that by leaving early.
One of the observations that I've stumbled on in a long career of stumbling through life is that those of us who've faced early years adversity, particular adversities, often become watchers, observers, often develop a pithy sense of humour, a dry sense of humour that's concealed. It conceals a certain attitude and a certain way of seeing the world. I think Tony was someone who saw the world in quite a different way to many of us, and he was certainly a watcher and an observer, and he was very funny. And it took me a long time to realise that. Tony was an onion to me, who, bit by bit, I saw layers. The first time I met him would have been through Speakeasy, and he, for ages and ages, we'd just say hello, and we'd have a sentence or two to say to one another, and it grew and grew. And he's a slow burn, I felt, this bloke. And then I realised how funny he was and how receptive he was. And then when I bought his book, eventually when that came out, the discipline of having to learn how to listen to Tony when he was reciting was revealed through the written word, and different meaning and slant to the poems emerged. And he was a very gentle man and a kind man. And I spend a lot of my time, my work with children, some adults, talking about kindness. And Tony had it in spades. You could sense that straight away. It was the sap that went through the wood. And so 5, 6 weeks ago, Phil asked me if I'd like to be part of this, and I was very pleased and honoured to do that. And I thought what I'd do is I'd write a song that stitched together words from Tony's poems. And so essentially most of the words here are Tony's. Michel de Montaigne said, I have a garland of flowers and I'm just the tide, the cord that binds them. And I've chose this guitar to write it on because it's got birds on it. And, Tony had a talent with birds, and birds is a theme for the song because it's. I imagine Tony. There are lines in there are some lines in this that are my lines, and that's that I'm not home, and Tony isn't home because he's somewhere else. Because Tony is. I can tell you now, as a bird. Tony has become a bird. Some of us become the elements. Some of us become animals or birds. Some of us inhabit the souls of people who deserve another goal. Maybe. And so this is Tony. I imagine Tony is a bird by the Caldew. And I started this song in Eden Valley, and then I was away in Andalusia for a month. And I took it with me in my head, and the words were written quickly because they were already written mainly, dead easy. And but the melody took a long, long time, and it became a sort of a flamenco cadenza. And luckily for you all, became. I think Tony was speaking because it became much more a melody based on. There was more English folk in feel. And it's so I've sang it and sang it and sang it and let the melody come out to me, and it's still not there yet, but it's too late. It's called Tony by the River of Hymers. All the paths pushing me up the fell, leading me away from awkward conversations to a call or hanging tongue where my voice drops a stone atop the jumbled bones of the tarn. I'm not ripe enough, caught in this flesh, the dipper pecking on my side, like a dear friend knocking to see if by chance I'm home. I'm not home. I'm
be with me now, rub my aching back. I taste the North Sea spray caught on my wrist as I remove my gloves, take a pencil, make a line and another line to catch the fierce blue storm that resides both inside and outside of my soul. Then I'm home. I'm not home. I'm not, I'm not home. I'm not home. I'm not home.
Some poets write about other poets irrelevantly and humorously. And this is his poem, Norman Nicholson on the Ratty. Black Coombe was capped by a thundercloud. It made me think of him just over the hill in Mill, and whether he came to Ravenglass to shed solemnity and join the summer throngs on the steam railway that heads up Eskdale. I bet that Norman Nicholson rode the Ratty, buttocks aching on a narrow wooden bench, mutton chop whiskers flying, spirit shouting as loud and joyful as the steam whistle, tang of chugged smoke, mud flats, pasture, then woods with galaxies of rowan berries, and the becks refilling after long drought. His hand, I'm sure, joined in the ripple of waving when the trains crossed at Burton. In a sudden shower, he too rootled for waterproofs in a rucksack. In his wisdom, he didn't risk spoiling a young child's day by pointing to the sparrowhawk flying away with the creature dangling from its talons. Tea and bun for him at Delgarth station. Then maybe he left the crowd behind, crossed the Esk at Doctor's Bridge, and found an old peat road to the wilds of Green Crag, and a view of high mountains further on. I never got the pleasure of walking with Tony in the mountains. The nearest I got was when I visited his house, and we went down the lane beyond his house, but we only got to the bottom and we turned back because he wanted to talk about poetry, for heaven's sake. But yes, that's what we did. But whether he walked with companions or on his own, I think he shared a companionship. He found a companionship outdoors. And this is called Cheers. A scatter of snow buntings work a seed-specked snow patch on the north flank of Stybarrow Dock. They swirl and settle like their older name of snowflakes. They are so rare this far south that the male's white wings and black wingtips semaphore a marvel. Dotterels are just as rare. Months later, on the same hill near Helvellyn, I hear the sweet song of their breeding season and see a pair with startling white stripes above their eyes. They let me come within 10 yards, 5 yards, before they fly away. Another casual marvel. I cross this hill on high passage from Glenridding north to Threlco for freedom and sanity, not rare birds. To follow a bulletin on a birding website would bring the relief of a trip not wasted, but never this deep delight. The gifts of serendipity. Meetings like these are glorious, whether with birds, beasts, or people. I sit on hilltop cairns, lakeside boulders, fallen tree trunks, bar stools, and cafe seats. I raise water bottles, glasses, and coffee cups to chance companions.
We're sort of starting to head to a conclusion, but I've got this little story I'm going to share with you, and it's about an afternoon Nick Pemberton and I had in 2017, and it's called Now No Swims on Mun.
Yeah.
Which was one of Nick's favourite magic tricks, because if you turn upside down, it says the same thing. In a classic case of if I'd known it would be good, I would have gone, Nick Pemberton and I found ourselves doing an interview on Monday, the 23rd of October 2017, with Roxy McRae from That's Cumbria TV about the Black History Month, which had been held at Tully House the previous Friday evening. Along with responses by the Speakeasy poets and musicians, we had screened some interviews from the film This Place. My friend Kelvin had come along to share some of his stories about his heritage, celebrating the Edo people in the Benin Kingdom. That's Cumbria. Well, it was based at the Enterprise Centre. I don't know if it's still there, but at the time it was based at the Enterprise Centre opposite the swimming pool. And Nick had asked how long the interview might take. I said maybe 10 to 15 minutes. He thought that sounded good, and that he would go for a swim afterwards. So we brought a towel and his swimming trunks along. We met Roxy outside the building and did the interviews quickly by the red brick walled building just along the cycle path from the car park. Nick's swimming stuff was rolled up in his towel and resting on top of the wall as he did his piece to camera. And then he collected it as I spoke to Roxy about the film and the event. It went well, but Roxy was visibly very upset. It transpired that she needed to get something like 7 stories by the end of the day or they'd be off the air. Nick and I gave it some thought and figured we could help. Darren Harper had only recently set up the Film and Lit Society on Fisher Street. And so, with one quick phone call, we arranged for Roxy to go to interview him. It's gone now, sadly. But it was only 10 minutes walk from the Enterprise Centre. And so Roxy, Nick and I walked through the town centre with Roxy and I carrying the camera and tripod, and Nick had his towel tucked under his arm. We were in the middle of telling Roxy there's always lots of art stuff going on when we bumped into Derek Elan and introduced Roxy to him and said how he was linked in with loads of artists and had a gallery and was a good contact, but she'd follow up on that later. Darren did a really good interview. Talk up the fill and lit. And Nick sat at one of the tables scribbling away to give it some foreground interest. Now that we were in this part of town, we realised Speakeasy was on that Wednesday night, and we wondered if it might be possible for Roxy to do a piece about it. So we nipped over to Fox's to ask Becca if it was okay. Do you remember? A slightly bemused look was etched on the faces of the staff as we tumbled inside the warm glow of Fox's Cafe, camera kit in hand and the rolled up towel once again under Nick's arm. We explained the situation and Becca kindly agreed for Roxy to return the next morning to do an interview with her and Nick about the cafe and the Speakeasy open mic. So about an hour and a half or so behind schedule, I think Nick finally got to the swimming pool. Or he may have been knackered and just gone home. The interview at Fox's Cafe came across really well. Becca was calm, relaxed, professional as ever, and talking about some of the new coffee blends they had available, as well as the wondrous creative work the poets and musicians share. And Nick was Nick. He was asked if it was going to be a specifically themed open mic. He said something along the lines of, "We've got a Halloween poster. The writers and musicians share their stuff." Yeah. They'll be my friend, Tony Hendry. So there you are. Of all the people who come along, we gave Tony star billing. And who could argue with that? Thank you very much. I just wonder if Chris, if you might like to come up and say a few words. And then
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Tony's little brother, younger brother. It's tomorrow will be 5 months to the day when we lost Tony. One of his last messages to everybody, the world, even though he was struggling to speak at the time, it was tell everyone, if they think anything is wrong, don't mess about, don't prat about. He actually said, don't fuck about. But you know, that was one of his final messages to everybody, because you know, he knew. I think he knew something was wrong, and he took too long to do something about it. But there we are. 2 months ago, the family got together and scattered Tony's ashes. A lovely day, and it was up at Mooresdale. If you know it, it's quite near the sort of the old mineral works, and it's just at the point where the Coaldew becomes one river. And he loved the Coaldew, so we thought that might be. You can still see the back of Skiddaw in the background and all that kind of thing. And some of his ashes spilled into the Coaldew. Some of them drifted over the fells because there was a bit of there was sufficient breeze to scatter him over. I think you'd have been all right with that. And the other thing we did, we did find the file of Coaldew water.
it wasn't a crystal file, to be honest. It was in a type of NHS container. And we emptied that just so that, you know, to put it back where it belonged and all that kind of thing. So that was that. But the main reason for being here and Phil asking us, it's really to thank everybody for tonight. It's been wonderful for the family to hear Tony's work brought to life, you know, by people who clearly cared about him. We can't thank you enough, and it's not just for tonight, but it's understanding. We understand how much this group and you yourselves meant to him. And you know, we've spoken about the stammer and everything like that, but it was actually this group that led him to the point where sod it, you know, I'm going to go for it. And that was the deal with it moment, and you all saw it probably better than we did at home. And it grew and grew, and unfortunately, you know, he was just, we lost him when he was reaching his peak. And that peak was largely so much down to yourselves and the support and the confidence that he got, and he was just ready to, he was going to have a great 10 years at least, but, you know, it didn't happen. So, on behalf of the family, and some can't be here because elder brother still not too good and struggling with tracheostomy and things like that. Tony's aunt really wanted to be here, but the rail strike has kind of put that on. She's 88, so just, you know, didn't want to get too much of a scrum on the train for the sake of the other passengers, really. But we just want to thank you for a wonderful evening. Thanks to Phil and everybody who's contributed and said such nice things. And that was it. Thank you.
To get up after that. Lovely. Going to close with 2 poems about fells. But first, I'd also like to say a big thank you to Phil for setting up tonight. And a massive thank you to Tony's family for support and sort of allowing us to do this. On completing the Wainwrights. I wish I had a well-upholstered bum on which to shuffle down to Mosedale from Doorhead. Mine's too scrawny to use with ease on this ragged slope, this steep hell of loose stones and soil left by hordes of jelly-legged humans. So I teeter. An insect with 6 limbs, arms and legs, plus tracking poles, none working well. What grief is this to visit on a weary 60-something, soon after the climax of years of effort on red pike on a fine May morning? Then it was ouzels and wheat ears, the endless glory of fells and dales, a smudge of island over the sea. Now, it's one slip too many, a lurch, a tumble, and a slither on my back. Not too far, but when I reach a halt, I'm sick with shock. Blink, blue sky. Blink at blue sky, and work out where and how much I hurt. Could be worse. Lower back aches, but forearms took the brunt. Scrapes and bruises. Up. On to Mosedale. Wasdale Head, into the dimness of St. Olaf's Church, to thank whoever for a lucky escape, with a happy legacy of angry scrapes. May these scars never fade away, so I can trace them and remember when all my walking days are done. And finally, Skiddaw. September. The schools are back. Heather, bracken, and rowan berries splash purple, brown, and crimson on the lower slopes of Skiddaw. In the long truancy of retirement, aging man greets age-old pal, for maybe the 100th time. I take the classic route again. Ulloch Pike, Longside, Carlside. Gained height delivers the west. 6 miles past the long, deep lake, binoculars find the corner house where my mam lived final years. Her birthday, so she talks to me, pointing out my red brick school on the far edge of the same town. I ask, how long since the grammar was converted to apartments? 25 years. No time at all. These ice-hewn plates of stone on Skiddar's dome were formed 400 million years ago. Around the summit cairn, the chill browns gossamer-winged insects. Here, once, in August rouse, I watched a cloud of them sliced by a crowd of screeching swifts. Once, the mountains of Mourne shined snow-capped in purest light across the glitter of the Irish Sea. Once, a family emptied a casket, and a fierce blue storm flung a cloud of ashes northward, towards Calver, Knott, High Pike, Carrickfell, Culbeck, Carlisle, and the blur of the borderland. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming along. It's been a really lovely evening, and just let's have a round of applause for everyone who's read for us. Everyone who sang as well. Thank you to Poppy and Jayden and Dan and the Source for hosting us. Thank you to Tony's family and friends and everybody for letting us do this. We're hoping to do another collection of some of his poems that he was hoping to do at some point. So watch this space, as we're hoping to get that together over the next 6 months or so. So there'll be more poems to share. So yeah, thank you all. Another round of applause for everybody. Let's have a round of applause for Tony. Take care, get home safe. See you soon.